you. We're doing Nehemiah chapter 12, and we're looking at this. And again, I think I'm going to break it into two messages, but I just want to walk through the whole basic outline. And again, today be a little bit more interactive than perhaps usual. But the question, again, the overarching theme of the entire book, I'm doing great work. And again, the question I asked you earlier, what things are you doing that are part of the great work? Which ones are kind of neutral? Which ones are distracting us? Now, in this chapter, I'm not going to read any of it. If I were to read any of it, I'd make Dave read it again or someone like that who would butcher all these names because it's just full of names. But there's a couple of thoughts that kind of bubble to the surface for me, and they are, I'm going to quick run through them. They're joy, purity, honor, and generosity. And I'm hoping this morning, again, like I said, I'm not sure if I'm going to get through all of them because I want to spend some time on each of these concepts. And today I'm going to go off the reservation. I'm going to be very practical application kind of is my expectation rather than just simply talking about so there'll be a principle and then I'm going to pause and spend some time in application. That's why it's going to take me so long. So this morning as we talk, I want to look at some of these thoughts. So the first idea is this idea of joy. And again, as we think about joy, what comes to your mind other than some girl's name? What comes to your mind when you hear the word joy?
It's different than happiness.
It's different than happiness?
Yeah.
Okay? In what way?
Because if you have true joy, then you can't have your joy stolen from you regardless of your circumstance. Whereas with happiness, it's dependent on the circumstance you're in at the time. Okay,
so somehow there's this, what's the source of it?
Right.
So the source is me, the source is someone else, okay? Right. It's external
true joy
versus
is from
internal.
within, whereas happiness is from outside.
Okay, good. Now I'll argue that that's not actually accurate because all of our joy is found in Jesus Christ, which is still exterior. Sorry, I don't mean to pick on you, but I just want you to see that our joy is actually not ours anyways. But yes, it's rooted. What'd you say?
Argue the Holy Spirit, which is internal.
Okay, we're gonna do it.
that's what I would.
So yeah, but anyway, so yeah, we're gonna split hairs. But yes, it's rooted in such a way that it can't be taken away by a circumstance. Okay, great. Other thoughts? What is joy?
This baby.
Huh?
This baby.
The baby. Okay, good. Just something unique about kids. Yeah. It can either be a lot of fun or a lot of work, huh? Okay, what else? Joy. Joy. Keep going on this concept. What does it bring to mind? What's the feeling cause? What does it generate in the family, in community? Is it stoicism? Very quiet? Don't you remember, what was that dog's name on television back when I was a kid 100 years ago? Droopy? I'm so happy. Right? Yeah, his jaws hung down on either side, right? And just everything he said, oh, I'm so happy. You know, it's something about joy that causes us to be different, right? The heart races. We might feel tinkling, right? I mean, come on, when something great happens, when you get good news, when your heart is filled with joy, when you know things are secure, something happens. You speak louder. You speak quicker, right? Oh, I can't believe how good the Steelers are doing this season. Yay. You know? I mean, you go to a basketball game or a football game. My daughter's boyfriend does barrel runs. You know, they do horse stuff, you know? I didn't know you could hoot and holler at a horse thing, you know? I thought you're supposed to be quiet. And the reason I was always taught to be quiet around horses is because that aggravates the horses. And I've done that before. But nonetheless, I was sitting on the side. I'm not making it. They're out there screaming, kick him, go. I'm like, okay, these people are into it. They're excited. So I want to start with this word joy. And I want to make sure that we catch this idea. It's not stagnant. It invigorates. It transforms. You know what? I have spent so much time in church, and forgive me, not just the location of church, but amongst Christians, and there is very limited joy. And I look at this and I think, wait a minute, how come? And I think it's because we don't celebrate. I think the Christian church and families no longer pause to celebrate. We're so worried about offending someone who's not winning that we don't ever celebrate the wins. Someone did a great job. Let's pause and throw a party. Right? 55 years. Let's pause and throw a party. Let's stop and make a comment that 55 years ago, Jack and Sandy started their lives together. Not started out, it wasn't an arranged marriage where they just met each other, but, they married and they started this adventure together. And they got great kids and great grandkids and all these great fun things that happen. Let's celebrate. Let's not just, yay, whippy, you made it. That's not what we want to do. But sometimes when we come to church, we're like, oh, yeah, it's okay. We don't want anybody to feel bad. So we dummy it down. I want to challenge you that church should be a place of celebration. Why do I say that? And this is what I love. By the way, crowds create either excitement or problems, right? If there's a riot, the riot gets worse based on numbers, right? Stupid people do stupider stuff when there's lots of stupid people around them. That's what we're watching in the United States. That's what we're watching around the world. I remember when I was a kid watching these people in the soccer games over in Europe. And we'll pick on Europe because Europeans are kind of goofy sometimes. But they have a soccer game and they rush to get into the field. And they go rushing in there and they get all excited and crush someone up against the fence and kill them. It's a crowd event. Not a single one of you, I don't think, could just simply push someone up against a giving fence, by the way. They were pushing up against chain link, so the fence could actually move several inches either direction. I think all of us would be hard-pressed to push someone hard enough, not to run back and jam into them, but I'm saying just to lean into someone hard enough and long enough to break bones, crush them, and kill them. Now, I've been able to do that with little kids. I could do that with Ellie or Annie, but I'm talking about a full-sized adult human standing there trying not to die, right? They're screaming back, stop, stop, right? They kill them anyways. They kill them not because it's one person, because it's a crowd doing it. Now, I'm telling you that if we can do it negative, why can't we do it positive? Why can't the crowd, instead of going bananas stupid, go bananas wonderful? And I'm telling you, we do it all the time. There are times when we get together as a group and we feed on each other's excitement. That's what a football game's all about. How many of you have watched some of these COVID basketball games? I don't know where I was because we don't even have TV at my house. We got a couple Netflix kind of things, but that's about it. We don't have a television antenna even. But I was watching it, and they're showing pictures of people on the wall watching the game, and that's somehow supposed to energize the players to play harder. I'm sorry, but I watched my girls going through Mount Carmel. If there was nobody in the stands, they weren't playing hard. But you know what? You put a couple parents out there screaming at them, screaming with them, woohoo! And all of a sudden, man, they were going nuts. See, you and I need to recognize that part of God's plan is not in isolation, but in community. And so when we find joy in the church, when we find joy in Christianity, God is actually intentionally doing this because two people doing things together, 200 people doing things together, 2,000 people, 2 million people doing things together creates excitement. And so we've got to get it right. But as we get it right, and I want to show you how I think that's in here, because in verse 24, it says, and the leaders of the Levites, and it gives their names, and their associates who stood opposite them to give praise and thanksgiving, one section responding to the other as prescribed by David, the man of God. Now, this is something that had been going on for several hundred years, but what they would do is call and response. Now, I remember when I was younger, we talked about that in the military. Someone would be singing half the song and the other guy would be shouting back, the rest of the platoon would be shouting back a response. And that kind of got them all worked up, got them all ready for the day, particularly if they were going out to do, their 10-mile jog, I'm like, okay, I'll do a mile maybe, but you know what, if you don't sing and dance and make it fun, guess what, that's going to be a long hike. But you guys do a call and response to make it happen, all of a sudden it's worth doing. And so this responsive event occurs, and we do this pretty often on Sunday mornings. We do something like, He is risen.
He's risen indeed.
You see the call and response there. You guys have a response. You guys have a participation. But you know what? As we do it back and forth, and we hear it again. He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
He is risen.
He is risen indeed.
Okay, and I see the excitement grows. And so it's not just something where we do it once. We don't just, okay, He is risen. You're right. He is risen. It's let's move at this. So I want to challenge you because there's points in your life where you've lost that joy. I remember the pleasure of owning a brand new car. I only did it once, but I bought a brand new car. It was so nice. It even had a new car smell, and I could tell for that particular season of my life that it had a new car smell. I don't like new car smell, but it had new car smell, which told me I had a new car. Most of my cars were so old that they smelled like something like dirty socks or dirty tennis shoes or other dirty things, but not new car smell. And so, we'd Febreze the car, and it'd still smell like Febreze and something else. But you see, there's this excitement to a new car. Wow! I remember the first time I drove in with one of my Suburbans. It was the one that had the 454 engine. I was still up here, and people had gone out, opened my car up, popped the hood, and they were checking it out. I mean, I didn't care. Just as long as you change the oil while you're in there. No, I'm just kidding. But, they went out there. Wow, look at that. It's got a big engine, nice. I just needed a car to fit all my kids. I didn't care about the engine. I didn't care about all the other. Wow, ooh, ah, ooh. There's something about that excitement that we have lost or that we might let slide in the church. Now, some of it is because we've been told the church is serious business. And there's seriousness to it. We'll talk about that next. But at the same time, in the midst of it, we need to realize that we can't do serious if we don't have joy in it. If it's all work, it's no play. If it's no play, it ain't going to work. And so this call and response kind of praise service is going on in this early church. And as they're doing it, they're being very intentional. But one of the things they did, and this is where we struggle as the church, is they called attention to God. If you're calling attention to yourself, or if I'm calling attention to myself, it stops being about God, and it stops being anchored in joy. It starts becoming happiness, right? It starts being just, today's good, but tomorrow's bad. And it changes every day. This year we're looking forward to a nice rainy day because we haven't had many. Last year, we could have done without a few rainy days out there because we had rain all the way through September. The grass was growing into November. And everything stayed wet. It's just hard to work. The guys who painted around our church that particular year said they had rain every single day and couldn't get jobs done outside because either it was predicted or even the day they did our church. It was a 10-minute just flash storm, just popped up, rinsed half the building off, and go back and repaint parts of it because it washed off before it dried. And so some years we get lots of rain and we don't want any more. Some years we don't get any rain and we wish we had it. But you know what? If we're calling attention to the wrong thing, we'll pay attention to the weather rather than paying attention to God. Now I want to challenge you on this particularly because I said I want to talk about the principle, but then I want to talk about the practice. This is the one thing I want to spend a moment on in the practice for you and I. How many of you focus on what I want to call the 90%? Now, for a moment, think about this. How many of you have a physical problem? Go ahead, just lift your hand if you've got something that annoys you physically. Not talking your nose, Dave. I'm talking something else, okay?
I was going to say my sinuses.
Sinus. Okay, sinuses work. Okay, so sinuses are different because you can't breathe. But each one of us probably has something that kind of annoys us. A pain in the back. I've got a bad knee. I've got, unfortunately right now I don't have any cancer, but you run through the list. You say, well, you know what? Most stuff works. There's a bunch of systems in your body. The skin, the skeletal system, the blood, the transfer of oxygen and nutrients, the digestive system, the nervous system. I'm going to forget a couple of them. I think there's 7 major systems in your body. And any particular one of them can break down. And if you're really lucky, all 7 of them can be broken down at once, which is a lot of fun. I had an uncle who, when you touched him, you tore his skin. It had become so thin and so frail that if you just touched him, brushed up against him, it would tear the skin off of him. Now, he was only in his 70s. I say only, but he was in his 70s. So if some of you folks who are in your 70s or slightly north of that are saying, wow, that's crazy. But as a younger, older fella, he was already experienced this breakdown in his skin. I got some cuts in my hand, but I don't worry about that kind of stuff. My skin works. How's your skin doing today? Probably part of your 90% you don't ever think about, do you? Kenny's not here, so I can't pick him, but I have hair. My hair works. Might be a little bit gray, but my hair works. And most of you, it looks like it. Sorry, Steve, you got robbed. But our hair works, you know what I mean? Like, and for you and I don't even think about this. In my life, most of my day, I don't ever pay attention to things falling into my eyes to distract me. I have eyelashes. How about you? When you blink, you clean your eyes. When dust or stuff, pollen perhaps coming from above, those eyelashes catch all that. At night, your body automatically flushes all that dirt out, and you wake up in the morning with eye winkies or whatever they're called, sleep, you know. All those systems just work. That's what I call the 90%. Part of your 90% that's working right now, you're not even aware of. How many times currently is your heart beating? Do you know? You see, I have this thing on my wrist that'll tell me right now. Ooh, that's not good. It said 89, but that was when I started preaching. My heart runs up when I start preaching. It's back down to 70 now. I'm at 70 beats per minute. I run between 60 and about 75 is usually where I am, unless I'm out splitting wood or preaching. And nothing else really gets me that excited, or else I take my watch off because I don't want to ruin it. So, and so I don't get it. But my heart's working whether or not I think about it. Matter of fact, it works better when it needs to work better, and I think it ought to work better. It just automatically does it. If I'm jogging or running or swimming or whatever that's active, that demands my heart to pump harder, it does it automatically. I want you to pause for a moment. In your life, there's a whole lot of things that are going well, aren't there? I went down to Martin's a couple months ago, and there was no toilet paper on the shelf. How many times have you been to Walmart and there's been everything you needed? And you grumbled about the service. Do you see the 90% problem? Now, granted, they could have done a better job. But I'm telling you, there are people living around the world who don't have access to most of what we have. And I'm a 90% person who misses the 90%. And I would be dangerously risky saying, you might be one of those people too. And the reason is because culturally around us, we don't know how to catch all the good things that are going on in our lives. They become what we might consider automatic. How many of you woke up this morning and checked to see if your clock was working? Hopefully it works every morning. I don't don't check to see if my phone works. I don't check to see if, the stove works every morning. I assume a bunch of things. I have a dishwasher. I assume it's going to work. How many of you worry all night long? Because your dishwasher, the new dishwashers, they're high efficiency or whatever, they're Energy Star rated. They run for 3+ hours. How many of you sit there in bed and wonder if in those 3+ hours it might catch on fire? I mean, it's theoretically possible. They don't tend to do it. It's a possibility, but they don't tend to do it. But we could worry about it all night long. I'm telling you, if you don't run the dishwasher at night, what you could do is run it during the day when you're watching it. You sit there and watch it all day long. Make sure that for those 3.5 hours it doesn't catch on fire. But I know most of you guys, if you have a dishwasher, you do what I do. You push the button and you disappear. Because 90% of the time, we don't have to fuss with it. Now, it's frustrating when it breaks, but nonetheless, think about it. There's a lot of things in our lives that are just working. They work. There's some things we need to pay attention to, but they are 10%. And sometimes I would argue they're 1%. And we let that 10% steal our joy. No? I want to ask a question of you. What are some of the things that steal your joy? What are the assumptions that you make about what you ought to receive that haven't happened? What are they that you have decided to be upset about because it wasn't the way you expected it? Now, granted, there's some things that we do that there are contracts, that this is the way I want it done, and this is the time that I want it done, and this is how it ought to be done, and I'm going to exchange cash for that. But there's other things where we don't have that. We drive around town. I'll give you a very simple driving illustration. Are you supposed to let traffic in? If someone's coming off of an on-ramp onto the main road, do you make space for them? What's the answer? Yes. Do you know how many Western Pennsylvania idiots there are in this room that just said yes? Because if you went to New York City and you made space for someone, the person behind you and in front of you would turn around and shoot you and then run you off the road. Because in New York City, if you come on an on-ramp and you need to get onto the highway, you just push in. They expect it. There's an unwritten code to it. They don't think you're rude. They think you're right. But I've been bred and born in Western Pennsylvania, like all you folks who said yes. And when I'm driving down the highway, even in Pittsburgh, if I'm coming onto the on-ramp and there is an open lane beside the person that is coming up behind me, I expect them to move over and give me room. Now, if you read through the Pennsylvania Code for driving, there's nothing in there about that. It's just courtesy. Do you see that's an unwritten? My unwritten is move over. New York City's is pull in. You know, I could spend a lot of time on that 10%. Why did that guy pull over? What is wrong with them? Well, they might be texting, you're right. But there could be 1,000 other reasons why they didn't pull over. What if their mirror's broke and they really can't see out that well and they're concerned? What if it's dark enough that they're not sure if there's a car beside them and they don't want to pull over? What if you're my good friend and one time someone started to pull into them and they pulled over and hit a bus? My good friend doesn't change lanes anymore at all. Because he needs to be over there. He just drives in his lane because he was at fault for hitting a bus. He'll never do it again. And the reason he hit the bus wasn't because he wanted to. It's because someone else assumed he was going to move over, and came over and took his lane and hit him. I don't know. What's the reason for your 10%? Why are you drawn to those things? Because there's part of us that is drawn to the failed parts. It's drawn to the mistakes. It's drawn to the errors. How many of you can see a zit on someone else's face before you see their smile? How many of you can see a flaw in someone's hair rather than the fact that they've got a nice hairdo except for that one spot? How many of you notice that I have one eyebrow rather than noticing that I've trimmed my one eyebrow? The reality is we notice flaws like that. And that 10% steals our joy unless we pause and say, God, I want to rejoice in you. And so this story shows us that you and I have to be involved in community with this call and response. And again, it might be a pause where you say, okay, let's stop. I'm going to give Jack and Sandy a job this week. This week is your anniversary. 55 years. I want the two of you at some time when you're all alone. Maybe with your kids and grandkids, because that would be really cool. But I want you to pause, and I just want you to list all the great things about being married. Not just being married to each other. What's peculiar about you, Jack, that Sandy thinks is wonderful? Now, it might be a short list, Jack. I'm sorry. But no, I'm just kidding. But I mean, I bet if she spent 10 minutes on it, she'd come up with 100 things right away. And I bet if you spent 10 minutes on Sandy, you'd come up with 100 things. But you know what? In day-to-day life, you're probably more worried about the fact that the two of you are in the kitchen and you bumped into each other. But you know what? Be grateful that you're in the kitchen. Right? I mean, those are things that we don't pause to say, wow, what about this? Now, please, I want to do that for everybody. I want you to, this next week, ask yourself, what are some of the things that God has given me? What is the things about Christianity that you enjoy? When you go home, as you're in the car, here's the two options you have. You can even talk into the three options. Where's lunch? That's the bad one, by the way. Should have decided that before, because you're going to starve to death when you get there. But the two things you will do is you will either say the preacher was really good, and this is what I liked, or you're going to, on the way home, criticize something I did or said. That's the 10%, by the way. Because if it was 90%, if I was 90% bad, there'd be nobody in church every week. Does that make sense? So it's got to be a 10% problem, and I'm not saying I'm wonderful. I'm saying there's great preachers out there, there's much better preachers, all kind of stuff. But I'm saying as you drive home, you have the option to spend the whole trip home. For me, it was 25 minutes as a kid. And my parents could have picked apart the preacher, or they could have celebrated going to church. Wasn't it great to see so-and-so? Wasn't it great to hear that challenging message? Isn't it exciting to be part of the Christian Missionary Alliance where as we opened up with that first video, people's lives are being changed not only here but around the world? That's a 10% rule, not the 90%. So I want to encourage you, first off, what do you enjoy about Christianity? Second one I want to talk about is purity, and I'm going to walk through this one kind of quickly. And again, in verse 30, it talks this one through. Verse 30 says, when the priests and Levites had purified themselves ceremonially, they purified the people, the gates, and the wall. They purified themselves, they purified the people, they purified the gates, and they purified the wall. And I want to talk about each one of these real quickly so that we kind of have a moment. They purified themselves, and that is the teachers or counselors. Purity is important. If you've got someone who's teaching you who doesn't have it right, don't listen. I love when people ask financial advice of bankrupt people. That's my only complaint that I'm very vocal about with Trump right now. A man who has gone bankrupt 3 times or 4 times in his personal corporate life is now running our country, which really should never declare bankruptcy. Right? I'm a little bit nervous about him financially in that perspective. I just want you to hear this. If you are getting counsel about how to handle your finances from someone who has declared bankruptcy 3 times, you're probably getting in the wrong place. If we're not pure as teachers, if we're not consistent about what we do. Now again, we can be consistent, we can be consistently bad, but if you get someone who's teaching you is consistently bad, stop, pause, done, walk away. They not only purified themselves, that is the teachers, but they also purified the people. And so for you and I want to ask a couple different questions through this grouping. Who are the people that you listen to? It could be media. Those are your teachers. It could be pastors. It could be the internet. It could be someone who doesn't know anything about stuff. I'm getting ready for my next section of my addition here. I need to do some electrical work. So I've been asking all the people who I know understand electrical work. Megan Turnbull is a great electrician. She went to school without any splitters for all of her things to plug into one outlet. Should I ask her for how to do the wiring in my addition? Not a chance. But you know, we do that, don't we? The second set is the people that we're side by side with. If we're not careful, we'll let, I want to argue, dirty people in beside us. If you're going to have surgery on your heart, do you want your doctor to have just come out of his garden and not scrubbed up? You know, heart surgery right now is pretty simple. Say that kind of flippantly, but I'm saying it's a relatively simple thing. Matter of fact, they're so good at it that the only reason you will have problems after heart surgery is one thing: infection. Infection. They always fix it. It's not a complicated thing. Like putting a spark plug in a car. It's not that hard. It's hard to do it with purity, though. And so when you hear someone died of a heart surgery, 99.9% of the time, and I'm not sure what the real numbers are, but it's over the 90s, it's because of an infection that set in. It's not the surgery. And often what we do is we rub people with, they're not being careful, and you know what, we're picking up their stuff. But you know what, if you choose to rub shoulders with people who are good, who are clean, who are healthy, you'll become more like them. Just like at the beginning we said, if you holler back and forth at each other, if you're doing a call and response, you get excited. Well, if you're around people that are unhealthy, the gates. And these, I wanted to use the term interactions, but these are the things that are kind of, they're not people, but they're the things that we participate in that are a little more nebulous. What stores do you What TV shows do you watch? I mean, are they really that good? Or are they really that bad? Sometimes we get ourselves into these kind of more nebulous things where we're like, man, it's not really that bad. So, it's an easy one to pick on. Do your kids play sports on Sunday? I was the coach when my kids were playing. I said, we will neither practice nor play on Sunday because I work on Sunday. Just simply stated it. You know, the other parents were saying, yeah, but I work on Wednesday. I'm like, okay, so we're not doing it on Wednesday, we're not doing it on Sunday. That's fine. But this is something I value, something I consider important. Everyone has the permission to speak what's important to them. But if we're not careful, there's these things that we do a lot of. We interact in. Again, I would argue that in our world, it's television, social media. Who are you listening to on Facebook? You might not see a lot of these people on Facebook. But are they really consistently good for you? Do they raise you up? Or do they tear you down? Does your heart rate rise because you're angry and angst? Then I need to close these things out of my life. And that's why they're called gates in this particular. Now, for them, it was actual physical gates. But if you're not keeping the stuff that's coming in and out of your life pure, you're going to have trouble. But there's obvious stuff that's coming and going. What is it? What is it? Is it the newspaper? Is it a system? I pick on Disney regularly because I don't like their news stuff. They so often belittle male leadership, fathers, parents. Now they belittle both of them, but it's amazing to me how many stupid dads there are in Disney movies.
There are no dads in Disney movies.
Well, there are. There's
I mean, unless they're nincompoop.
yeah, in Aladdin, he's a nincompoop, right? I mean, the king is an idiot. That's their definition of how people ought to see all men. Now, please don't mind me on this one. It's not Disney only, because if you watch about 3/4 of the rest of television, you will see that most of the men are goofs. Everybody loves Raymond. How good are the dads in that one? Right? Go through the list of sitcoms that you watch. How many of the dads are good dads?
All the way back to Married with Children.
The last one I can remember where there was a good dad was Cosby. But even he was a little bit goofy, and Mom was much smarter and better than him too. Now, I'm not arguing that wives don't have an incredible place in the family. But I want to argue that if you're constantly watching, now here's what I've struggled with. I'm stuck in that generation. I watched what Megan is watching. It horrifies me how much cattiness there is in those shows. There's always some sort of drama. I hate drama. It gets me mad right away. The whole show's drama. Disney Channel, Nickelodeon, and almost anything that's written for anybody 25 and down. It's all drama. I mean, go watch The Office. It's half drama. And the guy's an idiot. Those are our gates. That's what I'm spending my time doing. I intentionally let these things through. And then the wall. This is the area where we compromise. This is where purity kind of feels easier to guard. These are the things that don't necessarily make it in, but they're the areas where I want to argue you and I allow a little bit of slippage in our lives. I watched the video on the Johnstown flood. It's really interesting to me because they talked about how it broke and what all occurred. The original dam, it had some leakage in it, so you just kind of packed it. They didn't pack it with good mud. They didn't pack it with concrete or rocks. They just kind of packed sludge into there. Well, of course, sludge just kind of slipped right back out. Once the water started coming, once it started to poke through that little hole, all of a sudden the whole dam broke. And I was watching the video that explained how Johnstown got wiped out. See, the dam upstream was made of earth. And as it started to wash over the top of it, started to cut through those holes, it literally opened the entire thing up. And as soon as it started to wash, it just crumbled as that water rushed over it. See, it's not a problem when the water is not going through it. The problem is when the water actually starts to wash at the spots that it's not supposed to wash. But then what happened, which was really bad for Johnstown, is Johnstown wasn't as dumb as the people upstream. See, they built a dam down in Johnstown. They didn't know it, but down in Johnstown, they had built this bridge for the railroad to cross. And the Johnstown Railroad Bridge was made of solid rock. And we're talking monstrous boulders lumped over top of each other and beautiful arches under which the water could flow at a regular pace. When that dam broke upstream, it came down and it come rushing down in the city. And the first wash through, it just kind of bumped the city. But then it ran into a non-earthen dam. And it didn't give. And so then the city of Johnstown became a toilet bowl because the water rushed down one side, hit that bridge, and washed back up the river the other way and circled around and just started flushing around and around until it could finally sneak under that bridge. And it's because that second bridge, That second dam was so strong, it couldn't knock it over. Had it knocked it over, Johnstown flood would have been something, oh, that's too bad, they lost some water. Now, granted, there were some people upstream who died because it filled the whole valley. But when it got to Johnstown, it got stuck. Because that second dam, that second wall, held the water. And you and I live in a world that's constantly pressing against us. And often we think, oh, it's that massive rush is all we have to worry about. That massive rush, that huge blow. But you know what? We're more like that upstream group. Just a little bit of water trickling through. Just softening a little bit. Just letting a little bit of trash in our life. Not quite packing it well, not protecting ourselves well, but instead letting a little bit through. And eventually that compromise becomes a massive flood in our lives. So, I want to pause here and ask a second question. What areas in your life are slipping? The first one was, what do you enjoy about Christianity? See, if you don't enjoy Christianity, it's easy to slip. Right? If you're not enjoying your kids, it's easy to be less nice to them. If you don't enjoy your job, it's easier to arrive a little later and leave a little quicker. Right? But if you enjoy it, you'll put all you have into it. You'll pour yourself into it. But then the second thing is you'll also be very careful not to let those little areas of weakness start to show up. You'll guard yourself against those. And so this idea of purity for you and I is an important one. And it's one of these ones that as you and I walk through life, I ask the question, what do I enjoy about my Christianity? What am I letting slide? What am I letting become soft in my life where it shouldn't be? Close with this illustration. You all know about a bruised apple, right? Once it bruises, how quickly does the rest of the apple go bad? And what do they say? A spoiled apple spoils the whole barrel, doesn't it? One rotten apple spoils a bunch. And you and I live in a world where we don't pay any attention to that rule. We know that rule, but when we talk about purity, we're like, no, it's okay. It doesn't really matter. Well, it does matter. What do you enjoy about Christianity? Spend some time on that today. Ask yourself, what is my 90% that I'm missing? What do I love about my family? What do I love about my community? What do I love about God? What do I love about school? It starts tomorrow. What do we love about? ... Now, there's some areas where you're excited, but there's some other areas where you might have become casual. And then what are the areas that I'm slipping? What are the areas that I'm getting soft? Not paying attention to these things. Father, this morning we thank you for your word. We thank you that Nehemiah built a wall. And we thank you that he didn't just build a building. He didn't just build a place. But he built a people. Because he was about a great work. Father, may we continue to be about that great work in our own lives. And where we've allowed some erosion to come in, may we be restored. May we be challenged. And I would pray that for each and every person here today, and those who hear this, that their joy would be reinvigorated, would be fed again as they lean into the 90% that you have done so much for us. In Christ's name, amen. Amen. David, if you can close us out, please stand.